Over 500,000 people are convicted and sentenced every year without even setting foot near a courtroom. And you could be next. So hopefully that's a nice clickbaity intro for what's going to be quite a dry technical subject. But please bear with me. YouTube apparently have got to grab your attention in the first 30 seconds. But what I want to speak about is something called the single justice procedure. So what is the single justice procedure? It was introduced in 2015. And the way it operates is that if a prosecutor decides that an offence is relatively minor and there's no possibility of imprisonment, then they can give the potential defendant the option that rather than come to court, it can all be dealt with just by, as the name suggests, a single justice. That is to say, one magistrate. Usually they're lay magistrates, that is, they're not sort of like legally qualified. Because we used to have what were called stipendiary magistrates, because they received a stipend, they got paid. They're now called district judges. But most magistrates are just, like local people who just do it for expenses. They are assisted, though, by a legal advisor. So what sort of cases do they deal with? Stuff like minor traffic offences, not having a railway ticket, TV licensing, that sort of thing. And the way it works is, if the prosecutor decides this is the appropriate method, you'll get an SJP notice. That gives you 21 days to respond. Now, you can't be forced to go through the single justice procedure. Even if you want to plead guilty, you can say, no, I want to come to court personally and, mitigate in person. And also, obviously, if you want to go not guilty, then you would probably say, I want to go to court. But you can tick a box saying, look, I'm going to plead guilty. I'm happy for you to deal with this. But what happens if you don't respond within the 21 days? Well, then it's still placed before the magistrate. And they look through, and if they think the case has been proven on, the material evidence in front of them, then they enter a conviction. They can theoretically acquit you even if you don't respond. That happened a bit during the COVID because the regulations were coming thick and fast and people were a bit confused as to exactly what they were. And when they got some new guidance, they said, actually, the evidence the prosecution is putting forward doesn't amount to enough to actually convict of the offence that people have been charged with. So there were some acquittals there. But the rationale is that, there's no obligation on anybody to turn up to trial, to court when they get a summons. So, it was to assist with listings. It's more so that, that they know how much time to allocate. The thing with the SJP procedure is that it doesn't take place in court. And it's not done on any particular day. They just dump a load of files with a magistrate and a legal advisor, or the court clerks as I still call them, and say, just get through that in your own time, please. What are some criticisms of the single justice procedure? Well, a big one is that it's not in open court. It's done privately, just in a room somewhere. Now, the Court Service have acknowledged that, and they are trying to do something about it. So, for example, they do publish now the lists, the actual court lists, and they're supposed to also publish, what the outcomes are, so that anybody's interested, especially like court reporters and journalists, they can have access to that information. Another criticism is that it's just this like bulk procedure. And some people who have got hold of the outcome spreadsheets, they've noticed things like, well, everybody got the same penalty regardless of sort of the level of the offence. They're all the same offences, but people have different circumstances, and also just things like different means, because you can fill out a means form and say this is my income and outcome, and they're supposed to adjust any fine to take that into account. There have also been instances of people saying, look, I didn't even know this was going on. The first thing I found out about it was when I got a letter saying, I owed so much money in fines to the court and I've got points on my licence. Now, if that does happen, there is a form you can fill out. It's a type of what we call Statutory Declaration, where you just, swear that I just didn't know. and that should reopen the procedure. There's also a mechanism where if, for instance, you didn't send off the means form and the fine comes back and it is excessively large, you can ask for that to be remitted to the fines officer, and they can adjust that. Well, there you go, as I always say. I hope you found that, as always, vaguely interesting and vaguely useful, and possibly vaguely accurate. I mean, it's an interesting topic anyway, because it is a mechanism that is used a lot, and especially in things like road traffic matters. But it also ties in with what Dan's been talking about all the council tax stuff, and the fact that they just do these bulk listings, and then the magistrate just signs off at the bottom of it. I mean, like I say, there is a record in that you can access the results, and if I remember, I'll put a link in the description so you can go and have a look yourselves. I was going to list some up, but I thought it's not really fair to pick on just a bunch of people who randomly happen to be in court this week and just publicise their names everywhere. But there you go. Oh, and yeah, please consider clicking, liking, sharing, subscribing. I'm not very good at this YouTube, am I? But I just enjoy doing it for you. And as always, thanks for all your comments, because I've got a big stack of things and ideas for future videos, and pretty much all of them are just arise out of your very interesting questions and comments. So much appreciated from me and the chaps.